My name is Clay, and I'm going to talk to you about home renovations today. Who in here has renovated a home? All right, lots of hands, right? Who in here has paid for a home renovation? Okay, dry crowd. Who in here has bought a car? Okay, who owns a car? God. Okay, great. What if I told you that I was going to sell you a car? I was going to custom build you a car, but you couldn't see what it looks like, and I couldn't tell you how much it was going to cost. How many of you are going to buy my car? Anyone? No hands? Well, let me tell you about the story of John and Sarah, some of my friends who are a little bit older than me. They bought this dilapidated property. It was their starter home. And they go in and they're like, oh man, this is messed up. They knew they were going to have to pay a little bit of money. So they go on Google and they say, how much is it going to cost to get our kitchen redone? And Google says it's going to cost anywhere from $20,000 to $70,000. Now John and Sarah, they're accountants. Okay, $20,000 to $70,000, that's a huge margin. They can't plan for that. So they call up, they go on Google, they type contractor near me. They call about 10 different contractors. They invite 3 over to their house. And they say, how much is this going to cost me? The contractor looks around and he says, $150 a square foot, $250 a square foot. It's going to cost you $30,000 to $50,000. Like, okay. Can you do a little bit better than that? It's like, no. Like, can you show us what it'll look like? No. So they leave. Or the contractor leaves. He's like, man, I know that they're not going to call me. John and Sarah, they're not going to call him. So what John and Sarah do is they go to Resia Design. They go in, they upload images of their initial property. They visualize it. They then customize those images with their preferences. Images pulled from Pinterest, inspiration images. And then they price out that kitchen. And then, as an informed customer, they then go and find that contractor. So, if anybody in the room ever does buy a dilapidated property, come find me. And let's figure out how you can make smart, informed renovation decisions. Thank you.
Awesome. You finally gave me my complete story. Thank you. That's all that I've been waiting for. Like, the whole story from beginning to end. It was great.
Okay.
So that's a great job. There was a good example for y'all, where he talked about it, like a little bit of the before and after. Yeah, I mean, I think it solves definitely a real problem. I've been in there. I've had that problem. This, kind of similar to what I was saying about the scheduling thing. I would look at like other people have tried to solve this problem. So like, what are you doing different? What's different now? Why is it going to work now? Or what, things like that. But like, it's a real problem. All right, I'm giving you the mic.
All right.
You're on hot spot, the last one.
All right. Kyle, so, wait, is the mic working? No.
The green light?
No. There we go. Is it working?
No.
No. Okay, now it's working. Thank you. So, when I was a kid, all I wanted to be was a YouTuber. I was very much an iPad kid. All I did was watch YouTube, wanted to be a YouTuber as much as that was what my dream goal was in my heart, right? So I went on YouTube, I went and tried to find as many tutorials as I could find. Everyone was giving me a bunch of different responses. Go buy this equipment, go buy that equipment, go do this, you have to get this software, right? So I was getting a bunch of different mixed messages. I bought a bunch of different equipment, cameras, microphones, different software. It was a mess, right? And my parents weren't happy with their bank account after the fact also. So instead of that, right, I took that experience, right, and I started making this app called Next Creator, right? Next Creator, it puts you on Rails, basically. You're becoming a content creator on Rails. So what that means is that you're learning from a mentor. You're learning from someone who is a content creator, who is going to help you to grow. So right now we have a couple different courses on our website, right? So it's different things like if you want to become a gaming YouTuber, if you want to become a live streaming YouTuber, things of that type of nature, right? So based off of what your exact preference is, you can go on here, you can say, I have this interest. I want to do wrestling, right? I want to do wrestling as a YouTube passion, right? You can go on there, you can find someone who has done sports related. You can find what equipment they've used, what software they've used, everything that they have done before. You can follow in their footsteps and become them, but even better, right? That's the goal of Next Creator. So if you want to follow me on this journey, follow me at Mahesh Bachu on LinkedIn. Send me a DM. I'm very open to networking. Have a great one, y'all.
Yeah, so that was pretty good. I would say a few things. One is I I would be curious as to why someone would go to this channel versus just sort of watching YouTubers that they like and using them as an example. The second is I thought you talked about what the product literally is, and that is very good. But why someone would be interested in it, I thought was not super strong, and just tightness on words and sort of tightness on delivery, and maybe a little bit more story to Josh's point than some of the other ones would be super cool.
Awesome. Great job. Thanks, everybody. Come here. That was great. I really appreciate everybody coming up and pitching. It takes a lot of guts to get up and pitch in front of everybody.
This is really cool, by the way.
Oh,
that
thanks.
you have this, like
Every week, if you know anybody at UT, you have to be a student, but anybody can come pitch
I'm
and
just
get
like
feedback.
jealous I didn't have this in Michigan. This would have been really sweet.
Thanks. That was kind of how it started, actually. I didn't have anything like this either. Can we get 2 autos, maybe 2? Thanks. It's really good practice, and I appreciate all of you coming up here and doing it. Like, it's hard, and it takes a lot of guts. And like, I don't know, some people make it look easy, but it's not easy. It gets easier when you do it and you practice, and you can see the differences, and you can see like what's working and what's not, and you can see that a lot of people start off having the same kind of challenges, right? So my feedback's often really the same. It's like story, and once you get that, I'll have like the next thing that I say to everybody, right? Because you go through a lot of the same things. So, but please keep doing it. I really appreciate you doing it. Please invite your other friends at UT to come and pitch. And it's a great opportunity to get feedback and to get practice, and please keep pitching. All right, so we have Justin here with us from Base. Really excited. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So I hope you all read the not boring post we sent out. Is that for the blog? Is that what it's called?
I don't know if that's what you sent, but yeah.
That's what. Yeah, we sent the one.
Yeah.
Did everyone get to read that? So I thought that was
lengthy.
I know, but it was awesome. Like it was. I hope you really read it and thought. I thought that was like one of the best write-ups I've ever read.
Packy, who wrote it, is.
I mean, I hadn't seen his work before, but I was just like, holy shit, like, this is like a saga, like, like super interesting.
It's an epic,
Thank you so much, Edward. And it really kind of captured, like, this, how the company was conceived, how the team came together, really the fundamentals of what the problem is. Oh, you want something to do? And so I just found it fascinating. It was super cool. And it got me super excited about the company. I've been kind of stalking them since then. I tried to get them to come to lunch with me today, which is where I was coming back from. But yeah, super interesting. And we're here to talk about Justin today. But I know his co-founder as well too. He actually had a company here at Capital Factory. I don't know if Zach ever told you that. But back when he was in high school, and we invested in it, and that was a social media company. It didn't end up working out, but got to know him through that, and was really excited to see whatever came next. So. Thank you for coming.
Yeah.
Excited to talk about it today. So the blog gave like a really good start, but let's just start with you and like tell us a little bit of your story. It talked about in the blog post about SpaceX and Anduril, 2 pretty fucking hot companies in the news these days, where you've already had experience. But let's even maybe go a little bit before that. How'd you end up at SpaceX?
Yeah. So I grew up.
Is yours on? Switch to mine now.
Thanks. So thanks for having me.
You might have to hold a little closer.
Thanks for having me. And really, this is really cool. Again, I wish I had this at. So I went to Michigan. That's where I started. But I wish I had this opportunity to kind of practice entrepreneurship in the real world in college.
And get to meet really amazing entrepreneurs and talk to them themselves. So it's like that's the best part.
Story starts in Michigan, originally from the Detroit area, and studied mechanical engineering at Michigan. I feel really old now, but I've always been like the younger person in the room, but I just turned 30, and so now I feel truly old. So out of school, where I had a few different internships, one of which was at SpaceX in school, and studied mechanical because I didn't really know sort of what. I knew I wanted to be an engineer, but not exactly kind of which area. And mechanical is kind of the most broadly applicable major. So I had a few different internships, one of which was at SpaceX, went there full time after school, out in Hawthorne, California, it's a suburb of LA. And when I started there, it was just around the time that the company started developing the human-rated version of the rocket, the Falcon 9. and the next iteration of the Falcon Heavy. So the one that's flying today is sort of this like big generational change. And one of the big projects there was basically spinning up a new manufacturing line for what is like the bottom 10% of the vehicle, which is like where most of
the complicated
most
stuff.
of the cool stuff happens. Yeah, like I don't know if you know, but if you like cut away a rocket, it's like mostly just fuel and oxidizer. Anyways, so we were spinning up that line and got a sort of first-hand look at how both supply chain and manufacturing works. So I was a manufacturing engineer, which kind of is like a combination of operational and technical. And this is relevant, I think, later as we talk about base. So I did that for a few years and then moved down to Brownsville, Texas. Anybody know where Brownsville is? From Brownsville? All right. The Valley, RGV? Okay, cool. So I spent 2 years down there at Boca Chica Beach, beautiful Boca Chica Beach. And when I showed up, it was an overgrown field that SpaceX had just acquired. And at the end, it was the first launch of the vehicle, so standing up a whole manufacturing facility and such there. And that was like a whirlwind experience, working super closely with Elon at the time, and just like figuring out how it goes. And I think this is like, while it was not a startup at the time, it definitely is not a startup now. I think it was very much a startup experience, because it was like, you know, Elon in a meeting was like, okay, you're going down to Brownsville, you're going to own the site, basically. And I was like, okay, I haven't really done anything like that before. I was 24 or something. And we're like, okay, we need to build a stainless steel rocket that is 30 foot in diameter, and I'm forgetting how tall, 100 feet tall or whatever. I was like, all right, what in the world looks like that? It's like, well, water towers look like that. And so we hired a company basically to teach us how to build a water tower and build the water tower, aka the first rocket for us. So this was in 2019, early 2019. If you see the like R2D2 looking Starhopper was the name of it. It was 3 legs. That was kind of my baby from start to launch. So, anyways, long story here maybe.
It's great.
So, anyways, this was like the experience of SpaceX. I was getting married at the time, and towards the end of that, and it was either her or Brownsville. Nothing against RGV or Brownsville, but it was not the place that my wife Connie wanted to live. And so, because her family's in LA, and so. Ended up leaving SpaceX and went to a company called Anduril, which does defense technology work, and was their first like sort of manufacturing operations hire, and it was based in Orange County, California. And this was 2020, early 2020. Yeah.
So right before or during the middle of COVID.
Yeah, COVID did not exist in Brownsville, Texas. Funny enough,
right?
According to Elon. Yeah, just didn't. Like 50% of the site got sick. It was a whole thing. A whole COVID Brownsville, Texas story at some point. But yeah, so went to Anduril and was the first sort of manufacturing hire there, and stood up the team building all of the hardware that they build. And so now it's a whole suite of things. But at the beginning, it was just the border security tower. It's called the Sentry Tower. That has cameras and sensors and a bunch of different effectors. That does a lot of border security and airbase security work. Bunch of different drones, some really cool products now. Kind of anything that was like electromechanical, physical in nature. My team and I were responsible for basically bringing to life to building. So it was like engineers designed the hardware, we gave feedback, and were there as a part of the design process, and then stood up the manufacturing line to actually build it at scale, and sort of take the supply chain and deploy it as well.
How often did they bring you something and you go back and be like, we can't build that?
Like every day, a few hours maybe.
That doesn't work that way.
Yeah, manufacturing is interesting in that manufacturing engineers are sort of this interesting hybrid of kind of getting back to what I said earlier, is like technical and operational. So it's like, what you find is that you can make most things. Like most things can be made with some process. It's a matter of like pain and cost, right? So it's like if your weird geometry requires 3D printing as an example, physically possible, pretty expensive, not that scalable in most cases. And so, yeah, we had a ton of back and forth with the design engineers. We actually had folks on my team that were design engineers previously, and then went back and forth. And so I think the best manufacturing engineers can both speak operations. They can think about kind of like how something is made and how we train technicians in order to make it and what machines you need and all that. And then they can also speak design language.
Yeah, it would seem like architecture is probably a lot like that too.
Yeah, totally. It's an interesting kind of like, technical operational hybrid.
In one of the first classes, the one talk, this great part about this class is, I don't have to actually teach. I just interview awesome people and like they pitch. So
Yeah.
there's not from a class planning perspective. It's all about inviting the right people. But the first class, I give a talk, and I talk about if I were them and I were trying to start a startup, what would I do? And one of my first
Yeah.
pieces of advice is like, in general, like there's rare exceptions, but you got to kind of know a lot about something. Some areas you got to know more than others, but like usually you gotta be an expert at something, right? And so like you became an expert at something, right?
Yeah.
You learned how to build stuff, and you learned how to build. First it was mechanical engineering broad, and then it was okay. Like I built like kind of one of the hardest things probably that nobody else did. I built a rocket. So then somebody else comes along and they're like, all right, now we're going to help us build all this other stuff, right? And suddenly you're the guy that can take these ideas and turn them into reality. It sounds like.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly was a huge team effort in both cases. I can't really take the full credit, obviously. I do think that's really helpful advice for folks. Is like you don't necessarily need to be hyper specialized in the way like a PhD is, where it's like the most in the world about this like extremely narrow thing. But I do think that you need to have a skill set that is very specific in sort of one vertical, and that really should apply to your startup, I think.
What do you bring to the table, right?
Yeah, or it's like, why do you have a view on the world about a specific topic that is unique or differentiated in some way? I'm not going to get the quote right, but Peter Thiel talks about this, if anybody has sort of watched some videos of him, where it's like, what is the unique insight that you have about the
What
world?
do you think is true that nobody else thinks
Yes,
is true?
thank you. Exactly.
Mike Maple says, what do you think is non-consensus and correct?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Other people don't believe, but you do, and you believe to be correct. And I think that's a really powerful sort of like seed of an idea. And by the way, the seed of the idea does not have to be some like brand new thing. In engineering world, it's like, people are like, in hardware land, it's like, oh, if you don't do nuclear fusion or like, mining ice on the moon, like it's not like, unique or whatever. That's not the case. You can have, and I think as we talk about the company, you can have sort of variations on existing technology and implementations of existing technology that are unique in their business model, unique in their operations, unique in the way in which they're delivered, or unique in the way that a product is built. And I think that sort of, again, starts with like this key insight of something that you believe that the rest of the world doesn't.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. In our second class, the only other one that's different really than the standard format like we're doing today, the students get up and they introduce themselves. Every student gets up and introduces themselves to the rest of the class and kind of pitches themselves. And one of the questions I had you all answer was, what are your skills? Like, what do you bring to the table, right? If you were going to be part of a startup, what would you do? And so what would Justin say, right? He'd get up and say, like, I know how to build shit. I built rocket ships. I built drones and things. I stood up a facility in the middle of fucking nowhere, and during COVID. You see what I'm saying? And like, it doesn't mean those are the things he needs to go do, but if you're like thinking about what you need to go build, like you can see why someone else might be like, shit, I want that guy on my team. Yeah, right? Like, yeah. So like again, do you think like what do you bring to the table, right? It doesn't have to be that, right? But like, you kind of got to bring something, like just bringing the idea is not a great start.
Yeah, I think that's right. Ideas are. I'm sort of of two minds on this. Like a lot of folks are like, well, if I just have the right idea, then it's all done. And like every business is just an idea. It's like, at least where I sit in my role at the company and just thinking sort of my background, which is very just like rubber meets the road, get the thing done. Like the idea is like the first 0.1% of it. Like the execution is the other 99.9% of it. So the idea is not as important, I think, as certainly as I thought starting out my career. The other thing that I was going to point out is in interviews, and I stole this question from my co-founder Zach, but oftentimes him or I will ask like, what is your unique skill set, or when you're doing your best work, what does that look like? Because like oftentimes, especially at a relatively small company like ours, we don't have like, well, you're going to be an analyst for power trading, and therefore you're going to do this thing, and this is your job description, and that is it. And then once we fill that role's gone off the website. Not really the case. We're like hiring people that can, solve our problems, basically. But it's very helpful for us, selfishly for us, when we're interviewing folks to say, like, what is your unique skill set, and where do you see yourself doing your best work? And I think that's like something that a lot of people struggle with an answer to. I think it's always helpful to have an answer, not just to like interview to work at base, but like just in general, it's very helpful to have that in your mind. Is like what are you at your best? Because that is sort of the jobs that you should seek out, or the company that you should build, or the people that you should surround yourself with, or like people that can help you do your best work?
I love that question. I think it's a great interview question.
Yeah.
You know, I want to steal some of that. I first was introduced to that concept through an executive coach, actually. And they were working with an executive team that I was on, and they had us do that as an exercise. And it was like kind of like an icebreaker bonding kind of thing. And it was really helpful, really great, in a similar way to like understand how we all work together.
Yeah.
Right. And they basically said, here's a flip chart, you know, you can draw on with a marker, and here's a very simple, you know, chart, two axes. Show your career, you know, ups and downs, and you know whatever scale you want, and show like when were you like kicking ass and totally like just, you know, owning it and performing super well, and when did you feel like you just really it wasn't really working, you were frustrated, you were whatever, you know, and that probably goes up and down at different points. And there's one other discussion about then what would other people think about you? It often was not the same. But it was great to have them explain that and say like, I was, and then you hear them say, why were you kicking ass, right? Like, why was that the place where you felt like you were so effective, you were so good, right? And it teaches you a lot about those people. And I think turning that into an interview question is super smart to like understand, what makes you tick? What are you going to excel?
Yeah, I think some of the smartest and best people I've worked with are extremely self-reflective and really in tune with kind of their performance, right? And so like, you sort of always think you're doing your best if somebody just asks you like, was that your best work today? And you typically would think, yeah, it was. But like, really, was it actually your best work? And when was the last time you did your best work? And then think about the situations like, what did you have for breakfast? Like, who did you meet in the morning? Like, what was the topic of the work? Because you should sort of run this analysis in your head of, okay, how do I like set up my life and the work that I'm doing such that it is always my best work? Like I am setting myself up for success. There's a lot of like talk about like luck versus smarts, yeah. And it's like people, I think the most successful people that I've met and worked with have set themselves up to be lucky.
To be lucky, totally.
Right? They put themselves in the situation to meet an interesting person. They attended a class like this that gave them the opportunity to think about new ideas. They put themselves out there and again, force themselves to sort of do their best work, even if it's not the most comfortable thing.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
All right, so let's briefly talk about your co-founder, and because building a team is super hard, and that was another thing I was really impressed with in the story was about how intentional you were about meeting each other, working on the idea, kind of building out the rest of the team. If I recall, it really was like, okay, great, we're going to do something now. How do we build like the perfect team? So probably one of the most important parts. Tell us a little more about that.
Oh, not probably. It's definitely the most important part and something that we've probably spent the most amount of time on to date at the company, and something that we take a lot of pride in. If you think about a company, it's like a group of people in a room doing all working towards a similar thing. And if you don't have good people in the room, the thing that you build probably is not very good. It's kind of that simple. That's at least my mental model on it. And so yes, we're super intentional about building the team. I met my co-founder Zach when I was at Anduril. He was at an investment firm called Thrive Capital based in New York, and they were investing in Anduril, and I was the due diligence guy, like telling them how we're making stuff, and that's how I met, and realized that I think we have pretty complementary skill sets. We're very different people. Like, it's funny, like. And this is being recorded. I've told them this, but I don't know that we would actually have like been like good friends in college or whatever. Like we're pretty different people, but I actually think that makes a good team.
My work friends aren't necessarily the friends, but I still think they're great friends.
Yeah.
We work on stuff together.
I have a ton of respect for what he brings to the table, and I'd like to think, and I think he said he's sort of same for me. Our business, and if folks read the article, you kind of know what we're up to, but it's very multidisciplinary, right? We're doing things that kind of look like high finance or Wall Street things like energy trading. We're doing things that look like kind of more dirty on the ground, small, medium business, like installing electrical work and hiring electricians. We're doing things that look like a more traditional tech company, which is software, and things that look sort of like an industrial company, which is like hardware and big manufacturing operations.
And you have regulatory challenges.
And yes, thank you. And the fifth one is definitely a regulatory challenge. It's something we've spent a ton of time.
They have to get the laws changed in some cases to like do what they want to do.
Yeah, like the rules are there to be to be shaped in the way in which you think is sort of most optimal. The rules were just written by people. I'm a person. I can just help write new rules if needed. So we should talk about that. Actually, that's a whole interesting topic and something that I did not have any experience before.
It's a lead into my closing question, which will be, when do I get this at my house?
Okay,
So we'll get to that.
Yeah, great.
Here you're in Austin.
It's a regulatory problem.
I know. That's what I was assuming. So.
Where was I going? So the team. So because we have all these like different disciplines and different facets, we've wanted to find an expert's maybe the wrong word, but somebody that we think is like has the potential to be or is already the best in the world at that thing. So the best in the world at software development, the best in the world at Texas energy policy, very specific. And when we interviewed Tori as an example, is her name, who's our head of policy, just as an example, we were like looking for a pretty specific skill set, is like Texas, specific state level government knowledge, really high ownership, and just like really strong culture, and the ability to get shit done, and have a lot of knowledge in the energy space. And back to my earlier point about like thinking about when you're at your best and when you're sort of like what work you are specifically good at, Tori is, we think, selfishly for the company, and I think for her, is the best at this particular thing. We try to do that for each discipline and very intentionally build out the team. And I think what we've done is like a mix of very experienced people and relatively junior folks. We have a handful of folks that just graduated from college, a handful of UT grads, and we have a handful of folks that have 10, 20, 30-year careers. And that mix allows the later career folks to mentor the early career folks. And what we look for when we're hiring earlier career folks is sort of high ceiling, we say, right? So it's like, you might not have any experience. Lots of potential. You might not have any experience, or honestly, not even a whole lot of relevant experience for that one thing. But man, you can learn fast, you can work hard, you're very curious. Those are the traits that we're looking for. So anyways, we built out the team kind of looking at those traits.
So, a little bit of the elephant in the room. I mean, I'm sure if you read the article, you might have noticed Zach's last name. So his dad's Michael Dell, right? Yep. So one of your superpowers, I know Zach, and I can just imagine, is as you go to build a team and you're thinking, how do we get the best people in the world? That's an advantage, right? Like he's got a reputation. Like you've got those kind of like I look at it like, well, of course they should be going after the best people in the world. Like you can. But I gave that same advice to these people as well, and I do as we talk to startups. We're saying, as you're building your team, like, think about who would be, like you said, like what your need is often pretty specific. It's not like the best person in the world is not Elon Musk to be your co-founder. Maybe he'd be a good investor or a good advisor.
I don't think you'd want to be co-founder.
Yeah, but probably not the best person in the world to be your co-founder, right?
Yeah.
So like really think about it. Wow, for me, it's someone that really knows. In this case, just as using your example, Texas energy policy, right? Like that's not just anybody, and you can go figure that out. You can talk to people, you can look it up, you can ask ChatGPT, right? And then when you have the right opportunity, that's going to feel like an amazing opportunity for them too, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm curious, if you could take away that superpower for a minute and give advice about, thinking like if you didn't have Zach, and not that he's the only reason, but he is certainly a big advantage, right, in doing that kind of thing. Like, what's your advice to like, how do you go get the best people to join your company?
Yeah, well,
you're just a little startup.
Yeah, no,
and they probably work at some big company.
Yeah, I think that few thoughts, I guess. One is the best people aren't always the best people on paper. In fact, they're oftentimes not. A very experienced person that has spent a lot of time in a very big company. I'm making general statements. This is not the case for everyone, obviously, but somebody that has been at a big company for a long period of time has probably had their role scope very narrowed. My quick few liner on this is like a company does 100 things, and it's divided by the number of people in the company. And so when the number of people in the company is high, the number of things that you do as an individual employee is pretty small. And so if you look on average, most of our employee base, not all, but most of the team members have worked at relatively small companies because they've had have given them a lot of different experiences. So that's the first thing, is like not everybody that is good on paper is great. Number two is I think you want to establish what cultural values you hold really, really strong, and then look for those. Because like if you have a culture misalignment, then the person is not going to do their best work, you're not going to get along with them. And so like one of the things that I think I've brought, that SpaceX has instilled in me, and Andrew will to a degree too, is high ownership. If you're working on a problem and there's like a thing that's adjacent to that problem, but not really like that exact problem, it is still your responsibility. There's a book called Extreme Ownership by this guy Jocko Willink that SpaceX talks a lot about, and one of the leaders I worked for at SpaceX like basically forced us all to read, and talks about this a lot. So it's like that's a cultural value that I hold really strong, and so like that is the quote unquote best person.
The point is to get it done,
yeah.
Not to say you did your job.
Well, yeah, I mean it's that, and also just like you want to be focused. What I tell early career folks is like you want to be a scope attraction magnet, not repelling magnet. It's like you never want to say, oh, that's not my job, or that's someone else's team, or that's that other department. Like, you ever talk to a big company like Comcast, or you go to the DMV, it's like, oh, that is X so-and-so's department's job. It's like, we have none of that at Base Power. We will hopefully never have any of that. And that's like a cultural value we hold strong. So I think that's number two on bringing on really good people. And then number three is like, I think it's like the ability to learn and adapt is very important. So, and it maybe sounds cliche or obvious, but even for this example that I brought up, Tori, who has Texas energy policy, she has not worked at Base Power before. She hasn't worked on, this exact literal specific problem, because nobody has, because that's why we started the company, because nobody's working on it. And so you want people that have applicable skill sets and experience, but that have the sort of mental plasticity to understand new concepts that they have not done before and very quickly adapt. Honestly, some of the best teams are like not necessarily the smartest, but they're probably the most hardworking, and they definitely can adapt the fastest.
Okay, so that was a lot of good advice about who you want.
Yeah.
But what I asked was,
Uh-oh.
how do you convince them to join the company?
How do you convince them to join?
So now you've identified them, which
Yep.
we needed to, right?
Okay.
You're like, okay, here's what I'm looking for. But like, how do you get them to join you?
Yeah.
When it's like the two of you, or the 10 of you, or like.
Right. Yeah. It's well, it's not easy, and we've not had 100% success. We have aggressively chased certain individuals, like hounded them for months. Come join us, showed them around the office, had dinner with them, only for them to say no. So that's not a 100% hit rate, despite what it might seem. So I think you need to convince the person, you need to really understand what their motivations are. What are their interests? What do they want to work on? And are they really interested in the impactful mission you're working on? Right? So we have a mission that is surrounding renewable energy, around energy, sort of human prosperity through energy abundance, right? Those are the things that get me excited, get me up every day, and I think get our whole team up every day. And like, if the person doesn't have that or isn't excited by that mission, whatever sort of company you're building, you probably won't be able to convince them. Even if they're the best for that. Like, if they're not excited by the mission, that's not sort of, they could see them doing their best work in their life there, you're not going to convince them. I think the other thing is just like, especially at an early startup, you have the ability to grow with the company, and certainly a lot of our team members are very ambitious people. I think everybody here in the room here is likely quite ambitious, just given that you're here. And I think if you're selling the person on the ability for them to grow with the company, most ambitious people react very well to that. That's what I think is so a lot of folks. And then just like, it's the kind of back to the identification thing, but it's like the cultural match, right? You're going to spend 8, 10, 12 hours a day for 3, 4, 5, 10 years with this group of people. Like, that might be more than you spend with your family, certainly in an early startup, that likely is the case. Like, you better like them. And so if you can show the person that you think has a cultural match with you, that you have a cultural match with them, and sort of be explicit about it, that also helps convince people.
Mutual attraction.
Yeah, exactly.
Totally. Or think about that when we get to questions for you guys, because I think that's something they've done really well. And I was just super impressed in reading just the story about how thoughtful and intentional you were about it. So that's another thing I'd like to focus on, is just at least how then the story made it sound. How thoughtful and intentional and kind of first principles were you guys were about identifying the business opportunity, really building the case for it, writing your own internal memos and theses around it, being able to communicate it so clearly to create the article, and I'm sure to convince investors to get other people to join the team.
Yeah.
How do you guys do that? Is that something you picked up from SpaceX and Anduril? Was that something new from Zach, working with Zach?
Yeah, I think first principles thinking is definitely something that Elon has talked a lot about, and I think there's a lot of ex-SpaceX and Tesla people at Anduril, and so that's kind of the culture that I sort of grew up in, so to speak. Like if you can't explain what you're doing and you can't identify where it could go wrong, like you probably haven't thought hard enough about it, or it's the wrong thing, generally. So yeah, as the Not Boring article mentions, like Zach and I had been working together for I think 6-9 months or something before we actually both left our jobs and started the company, because we really wanted to make sure like that it was something we were really excited about, and B, that was actually a real market opportunity. And I think there was like, what we were looking for were like proof points in existing businesses that, if combined into something unique, is a potentially really good business. To be clear, we have like not one, we're not successful in the grand scheme yet. We're like 15, 16 months old. We have some success, and we've had a lot of growth even since that article came out.
You had a great article.
We have a good article, and
great
we have
memos,
a handful,
great team,
hundreds of happy customers.
Raised a lot of money.
This is true.
Correct. We're still not live yet, right?
Yeah.
Are we live in Dallas?
Oh, we're live in Dallas and Austin.
Oh.
We had a person that had an outage this morning that we protected them from.
Pardon me.
Yeah.
Live.
We're
Just in
live.
Dallas. Yeah.
We're like.
All right. So
It's going.
going.
6 new customers got back up just today. We're
Right.
installing actively. So yeah,
all right.
we talk about that, but yeah.
So there is
anyways,
growth for me.
the sort of like first principles thinking topic. Yeah. So we basically looked at, okay, there are other companies that are REPs. If folks are familiar, where you're from.
No, what's REP?
Retail electric provider. So this is going to start pull me out of the weeds here if we get too detailed. But
Time for your.
And so yeah, this is like kind of getting what I was mentioning is there are kind of aspects of the business that exist in different ways. So like batteries on the grid, that's a thing. There are big shipping container batteries in a farm field by Abilene and by Brownsville. There's a bunch of them all around the grid, but there's not that many that are distributed. We'll talk about that in a second. There's other REPs, retail electric providers. You have 100 or 150 different options of who you buy your power from if you live in Houston, as an example, but not one that offers batteries. There's other companies that design batteries for homes. Tesla does it, Enphase does it, there's a bunch of other companies, but no one that designs batteries that they own and optimizes for installation. There's other companies that install batteries, but there's none that own the batteries and also are the energy provider. And so it's funny, we go talk to people in industry and they're like, oh, you're an REP. It's like, yes, but you're also a battery hardware company? Like, yeah, that too. And so I think the core insight that we had was that there's a unique combination of existing business models with some tweaks on technology, on go-to-market, on operations. But fundamentally, physically, like batteries on homes is not necessarily a new thing, but the way in which we're delivering them and the way in which we're monetizing them is unique. That was sort of the fundamental insight, was let's combine a bunch of really interesting techno-operational economic problems into one to go try to solve problems on the Texas grid.
And so, the article talks about you spending, weeks, months pitching each other ideas, tearing them apart. Was this like a fairly baked idea that like one of you pitched and was like, okay, that's it, right? Or like, did this require a lot of honing and like, because it's pretty complicated.
It's super complicated. Yeah, it wasn't.
Not complicated in a bad way, but it's just like, it's sophisticated. It's not like, oh, let me explain it to you. You need the article.
Yeah.
It's not, let me explain it to you in like, in a 2-minute pitch.
Totally, yeah. The complexity of the business is still amazes me every day, actually.
It gets more complicated.
Yeah, it gets more complicated as you go. It wasn't like kind of read. So somebody with a Motley Crue shirt. I'm a big like heavy metal guy, Yeah, there we go.
I just wanted to know, do you actually listen to Motley Crue?
Yes, I love the movie The Dirt.
Okay, all right, it's real then.
All right,
Because
cool.
I have teenagers who wear all these like Nirvana shirts and stuff, and they had no idea. They could not name a Nirvana song, or Guns N' Roses, or
Yeah. Sorry. The reason I bring up heavy metal is there's a purpose. Is that like you sometimes read about these like how a song came to be or whatever, how Enter Sandman by Metallica was written, and it was like, oh, it was just this inspiration in the middle of the night. That is not what happened for bass power. It was very iterative. Zach was like looking at investing in batteries, and sort of had studied the like lithium through like battery sales and leasing and the whole value chain. I had been very interested in the grid and been looking at kind of what are the problems we need to solve on the grid. And we're like, okay, batteries and grid, that's interesting. And it's like, I think Zach's from Texas. I'm not, as I was mentioning. So he's like, I think they have this thing where you can like buy your power from people. Like that's called an REP. And then we like looked it up and it's like, batteries, grid, and REP. Let's do something with that. And so it was very iterative. That's not the case for every business, and folks have heard a lot of startup stories, I imagine. But we basically said, okay, like there's probably something here when you piece together these individual things and again build them together in a unique way. And we did a ton of like, okay, let's build out the spreadsheet level model of the business. Does it make sense financially? Is it physically possible? Like, I like read the National Electric Code. Super interesting to me, very boring to most people, but I read the National Electric Code and went, okay, I think we can actually like, there's a little bit of a loophole here to go above 20 kilowatt hours. This is like a very detailed point, but that's like core to something we're doing. Same thing on the battery supply chain. It's like, okay, where do batteries come from? Right? Like, right? It's like, where do batteries come from? What are the constituent parts? My manufacturing brain was like, okay, what is the bill of materials that goes into it? And we put together a rough should cost analysis of what our battery was. And so it's like, it was very sort of like technical, specific first principles, and it's like sort of, I was questioning his assumptions on the spreadsheet, he was questioning my assumptions on the spreadsheet, and we ultimately got to this sort of like idea of how this goes. It is not to say that like day one of the company, June 27, 2023, we were like, okay, this is exactly what we're doing, and we're still doing that exact same thing. Things have changed. As an example, on the policy front, like we did not, I did not at least appreciate like how important policy and influencing regulatory and legislative actions is like important to the business, and so we spent a lot of time on that. And we didn't, that was not part of any of our initial analysis. So things obviously changed, but a lot of our initial assumptions around the spreadsheet is still something that we come back to every day. It's like, how do we get the dollar per kilowatt hour to the number that we set on June 27, 2023?
So yeah, talk about Texas and regulatory stuff. So where is it available? You're pretty specific about where you said where you can get it in Austin. So just as an example, like why is it? I live in Tarrytown.
No, sorry.
That can't happen. So why can't I have it in Tarrytown?
So Texas is a deregulated energy market, meaning you can choose who your power provider is, and the people who own the poles and wires, like literally the grid that you see, they cannot own generation, meaning they can't own a coal plant or a solar farm or a nuclear plant, and they also can't own retail, they can't sell it to you.
This is like the three-tiered alcohol distribution in Texas too, right? Like the people that distribute the alcohol can't be the retailers, can't be the,
Yeah, similar, yes. And so that is the case for 85% of Texans. Austin is not the case for Austin. Austin has Austin Energy, as folks might know. If you pay for utilities, you pay Austin Energy. And if you want electricity at your apartment or your house, you only have one option, that's Austin Energy. This is the case also in San Antonio. San Antonio is something called CPS, City Public Service. It's a regulated monopoly. They own the poles and wires. They own some generation typically. And most importantly, they own retail. And so today, the way in which we monetize our battery by putting it on a home. Homeowner obviously pays us for the install, but then we put the battery on your home, and you pay us for electricity every month. It's like if I put a battery on your home and you didn't pay for it, I would be helping Austin Energy reduce their costs and maybe help you reduce your costs, but I wouldn't see any of that. I need to be Austin Energy in this case. And so one of the things we're working on is how do we access those regulated markets essentially as a business. There's some policy related stuff there. There's also just some like business model stuff and the reason why we're going into the deregulated markets first. But today we're live and basically the deregulated markets start at like Round Rock and Pflugerville, who doesn't know where that is, and they go all the way up the I-435 corridor up to and inclusive of DFW. And so today we're basically live from here through Temple, again, Texas geography maybe strong, maybe weak, depending on if you're from Texas. But here through Temple along the I-35 corridor, so bunch of people live there, and then in Fort Worth, Arlington, and Grand Prairie, folks know where that is. We've been very specific about where we turn on, even inside the deregulated market, because different cities have different regulations around permitting. This is gonna be a snooze fest, so I won't bore you with all the permitting details and the National Electric Code and how they apply in different places and all that. But point is, City of Dallas is an example, kind of difficult to get a permit. City of Fort Worth we worked with pretty extensively, and they're much more accommodating to us. And so, as we think about turning on new cities for service, we go and meet with the local officials there and pitch them on how we're able to positively impact the reliability of their constituents, how our product is safe, how we install it, et cetera. Spent a lot of time in DFW and in Houston doing just that.
Awesome. All right, I'm going to ask a few more questions, but then we're going to have time for yours, so please be thinking about the questions that you're going to ask as well. I want to talk about something that I know is a big priority for you and for Zach, and that's recruiting.
Yeah.
So first, why is recruiting so, you kind of touched it a little bit, so we're going to be a little, and I'm sorry if this is repetitive, but why is recruiting so important for you right now? Why is it one of your top priorities? Why is it something, when I met with Zach, he was like, do you know any engineers? Do you know any of this? This is for, it's clearly what his he's like, which company should I go poach people from?
Yeah. So as I was saying earlier, it's the skill set of the team is the average skill set of the team is the average skill set of the company. It's sort of how performing your company is. Our business, and a lot of what I personally focus on at the business, is highly operational. It is how do we build a process to have a customer that sees an ad or is just interested and comes to our website, all the way through to operating battery on their home, and do that such that it is the same every time. Or it's a lot of people this is probably a weird example, but if you go to a McDonald's in Alabama, in Canada, in Europe, in Africa,
all around the world,
they're all they taste the same. Yeah. I'm not a big McDonald's guy, but it tastes the same every time.
It's not true of M&Ms, by the way. But
oh, really?
Yeah, another story.
All right. But that is a feat of operational excellence. How do you have your supply chain, your meat source, the temperature at which you cook it, the temperature at which you refrigerate it at, all of these things are extremely important to having that consistent experience, and that allows them to deliver consistency to their customers, but also very efficient operations. This is something we think about all the time, and something I focus a lot on. And so people that are very good at you have M&Ms? That's great. I thought you were just making that up. Thanks, dude. Awesome. Hey, look at that. I'll leave when you're talking. So how do we build a very consistent operation? That is something that is a unique skill set for individuals. It's something we recruit aggressively for. So one of the early folks at the company, this woman named Dana. Dana was on my team at Anduril, and her and I had worked very closely together, building all the products I was mentioning previously, right? And manufacturing is a really good proxy for this strong operation. But if you were starting a solar installer or a battery installer company, you probably wouldn't hire somebody that worked in defense, right? But she has a unique skill set around manufacturing, and we're applying manufacturing principles to what we're working on. And so I think there's an interesting sort of take the proxy for what you're working on, look for companies that have really a sort of strong skill set in that proxy, and then apply it to what you're working on. If we were just starting a solar or battery installer company, she owns all of the battery installs and deployments at the company, we'd probably go hire someone from, SunPower or maybe Tesla solar installs, but they don't think about these things in terms of manufacturing. They think about everything in terms of a project, and they have all kinds of bad habits. And so what we were looking for when we were hiring our deployments lead, who's Dana now, was manufacturing orientation. Not necessarily exact skill set on installing solar or installing batteries, but sort of skill sets that are applicable. And I think that's an area where a lot of people kind of get lost. They're oh, well, I need somebody that has X, Y, or Z experience. It's well, what if they have, P, Q, or R experience, but that's really, really like X, Y, and Z, and actually better in some ways. That's what we did with Dana as an example.
So At Capital Factory, when we think about how we can be helpful to companies and what they care about, what are the points we can put on the board? Like, oh, we did that, we actually did something. We generally put it in three buckets. It's all people: investors, customers, talent, people you need to hire. Most people we meet are focused on investors. Tell them where you start. They're like, we need money. We know we need money. Usually at that point, you think that's kind of all you need. Then you get money. You guys have raised, how much money have you raised?
A lot.
I saw in the paper somewhere like around $80 million at least.
Not quite, but yeah.
Okay, so
yeah.
lots of money, right? Like,
Something in that order of magnitude. Yeah.
And so they've got a lot of money. I'm guessing they haven't spent it all yet. They are, they're obviously they're working on customers, but really the first thing after you get the money is then it's like, great, what are you gonna spend it on? Mostly people. You're gonna go hire people, and you got to build the best team you can. And then once you kind of build out the team and you get the product going, then you're pretty much focused on customers, right? I want to grow the business, we want to get it, and then when you hit some milestone through that, guess what? You're fundraising again, right? It's kind of a little bit of a merry-go-round.
Yeah.
And so, again, most of the people that I meet that are early, they're really thinking fundraising is the hard thing. They're thinking kind of like, I got this all figured out. But experienced entrepreneurs, I find, often really focus on the talent and recruiting side just as much, if not more. And in some ways, it's like the opposite. A lot of people think, if I raise money, then I can go get the right people. But I'll tell you what, if you get the right people, it's a hell of a lot easier to raise money also.
Yeah, totally.
And so, I find this to be a really common, I'm trying to give you time to eat all your M&Ms. But I find this to be a really common trait with particularly experienced entrepreneurs who recognize, wow, the team is so important. And as soon as they get going, they're just really focused on, how do I get the best people? How do I hire the best people? Now, some of the things I've heard from you guys too, is like, one of the things you do is you look at bigger companies than you that are hiring lots of people or are similar, right? So, I don't think any big secret, like, you guys like to hire SpaceX people, right? Like, I just heard that from Zach. I can guess it from talking to you, because, like, you were there, you know them, you know what they went through, you know what the bar is, right? You know they're going to share your extreme ownership, right, in that culture. Could you talk more about how do you think about that, just like, what's your recruiting strategy and being really savvy and smart about recruiting and doing it at scale? Not, I'm looking for this one person, but I'm going to be hiring a bunch of people.
Yeah, so just to give you a sense of scale, I think on Monday we'll have definitely if you include interns, it'll be 50, but I think maybe 50th full-time, or at least we've got 50 offers signed and 47 started, something like that. So we're now at the point, and just in the last kind of few months, of doing this, which you would say is probably at scale. Not at the same scale as at General Motors, but like at scale compared to where we were. I do think that people will over-index on the past company they worked at. So SpaceX is definitely a good bar to clear, but like, I worked with some not great people at SpaceX, actually. And so I think it's sort of the same thing on resumes and the same thing on schools. Like, I will tell you, I did not appreciate this when going to Michigan. I was like, oh, Michigan's like a great school or whatever, and pretty good, but turns out no one cares. Very few people at least care. I certainly, for your first job, I think that's probably true.
You're out there.
Yeah, certainly after that, it's like, I honestly, I don't even know if I could tell you like where 20% of our people went to school, because it's just like, it's all about your past experience. If you were an engineering grad and you're new grad, like, even the school, at least for us, is like not weighted that heavily. It's like if you did Formula SAE, if you're familiar with that, or research, where you had some great internships, like that is what matters. And so, kind of identifying these few key traits. It's like, if you're looking for a new grad or a new grad who comes across your desk, like, the things that matter are internships, research, or extracurriculars. Like, and school is like low weighting. And so you set up these sort of like somewhat subjective formulas for different sort of role categories. Hey, we're looking for an experienced person for this. It's like, okay, then like their specific skill set in Texas energy policy matters, and you basically just set the requirements for each role that you're looking for, and then you go look for them. I don't know if that answers your question, but like the way we've thought about recruiting is
I'm looking
is,
for secrets. Like we sit outside of SpaceX and
Oh.
watch who drives really nice cars and looks like a programmer, and then go stalk them.
We don't do that. We
will tomorrow.
We like I'm gonna pass the statute of limitations now on on SpaceX, so I can tell you this. Brownsville is a really ripe hunting ground for engineers that have been there for a handful of years. Because most people want to stay in Brownsville forever, and nothing against RGV, but it's like a great place to hire some of my ex Brownsville colleagues from. So that's like
You're like, all right, I can figure if they've been here for a couple of years, they're probably ready to think about their next thing.
Yeah, exactly. Or like, if you're at a company that is going through some sort of turmoil or change or changeover, so like
Someone just sold the company.
or sold a company like
Within the next year, half the people leave.
or they got acquired or whatever. Tesla is is a kind of a good example now, where it's like the company is definitely shifting its focus. It's just my opinion. It's inside knowledge, but shifting its focus towards AI and robotics as opposed to the energy space. And for relatively early career, ambitious people that want to work on, that are very passionate about a specific challenge, it's like hard for them to see the company that they're working on, like not working on like the cool, new hotness, right? They're not working on robotics and AI, which the whole company's sort of focused on. They're working on energy, which they still have a big, great business on, but it's not like the thing that like Elon tweets about all day, right? And so like, I think folks in sort of that example, we're very passionate about energy. It's like, well, there's a really cool energy startup right here in your hometown that's working on some really cool tech and you can live out your passion that way.
Are you familiar with and a fan of DISC profiles?
DISC profiles?
DISC.
No.
Something I'm a big fan of. It's a kind of a personality assessment type thing,
Yeah.
and it tends to it kind of looks at kind of what do you at some level, like, what do you like, what motivates you, what doesn't, and that's really different for different types of people, and recognizes that certain types of roles, most commonly, obviously you can't generalize everything, but
Yeah.
the type of person you want as an accountant probably has a different personality profile and things you can measure than someone who's going to be a salesperson or a CEO or an executive assistant, right?
Yeah.
We use a site called Crystal. Is Crystal with the K? I think it's with the C. CRYSTAL. It's called Crystal, KNOWS, Crystal Knows. And they had built this. They basically used a bunch of email data to build a whole bunch of profiles. So they can tell you your profile by you taking the test, also by them just kind of like reading your emails.
Oh, interesting.
And one of the really cool things they do, that's one of the best like demos of it, is like if we, everyone at our Capital Factory does it, so I can look up anybody else there, and if you looked up Zach, it would be like, here's how to email Zach,
That sounds cool.
Use, keep it really straight to the, maybe this is not Zach, but keep it really straight to the point. Use bullet points, blah, blah, blah. Someone else is going to be like, start by asking them how their day was, and for real, exactly that kind of stuff, right? And it's it's just recognizing how do those people like to communicate. So that's coming out of this. But they also have, for each role, they will have if it's a well-defined role, what they think the expected DISC profile looks like. And then you can tweak it as well to say, here's what I'm looking for. So then as I'm interviewing people, I'll get down to a set of finalists, 3 or 4 finalists, and we'll have them all do the gross profile. And that's definitely a big part of the input I'm looking into, is just are they gonna, sometimes it'll say this person is gonna get really frustrated if you nitpick them, and if you're my EA, who's here, in the back there, that can't frustrate you, because I'm gonna give you a bunch of really nitpicky little things, right? And or what they call a captain, which is basically a CEO type role. They're gonna have different things that motivate them, right?
Yeah, it's a great point. And back to the sort of mental plasticity piece. One of the things that I think I've seen good managers that I've worked for in the past do when they're interviewing or when they're hiring someone is not having a myopic view of trying to find someone that is exactly like them. I had some not great managers, some that I've either worked for with, basically their whole team is just like them. And they all sort of get along because they're just little mini copies of, the manager. I think the best hiring managers actually look for people that have strengths where they are weak. This is like, it sounds obvious and simple, but like when Zach and I were coming together to build a company, I think like as I was saying, we have complementary skill sets. Is like, I'm quite weak at certain things that he is very strong at, and I would say vice versa. And I think the best hiring managers do that. They specifically seek out people that are like I'm not super great as it comes to like customer engagement and empathy. Just not that empathetic of a person. I'm sorry to break it to everyone, but like I don't have a lot of empathy for people. Unfortunately, it's something I know and I'm working on, but it's like hard for me to engage on like exactly how customers think. It's something that Zach has in spades. I'm like extremely detailed, nitty-gritty, operational. Like everything's got to be sort of like I's dotted and T's crossed and understand the exact details. Not necessarily something that Zach has in spades necessarily. And so I think if you can build a team of people that are strong where you are weak, you can go a lot further than if you just hire a bunch of people that look like you, talk like you, sound like you, act like you.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And you know, it's like one of those things, I feel like a similar saying that sounds really easy, but is actually really hard, that you'll hear over and over, is hire people better than you.
Yeah.
You know, and
totally.
I'm you know, you talk about you feeling old, so I'm 48, you know, and almost 50, so, and I've now been doing this for, you know, almost 30 years, right? And I've had a lot of people work for me. I've hired a lot of people. I've hired a lot of good people. But honestly, like, I grew up hiring all my college friends, you know, like, and I was kind of the youngest person. I did hire people older than me, but I was, in hindsight, like, my approach to the early, kind of, you talked about the smaller the company is, the more jobs you have to do.
Yeah.
What I loved about that was, like, at the beginning, I would never hire anybody for a job until I did it first. Like, as soon as there was a new thing, I had to go learn it and do. But I loved doing that. It was fun. Not necessarily actually the best thing to do, but I did. And I thought that was a strength. Was like I knew how to do everybody's job, you know, like I could manage everybody, right? Like,
yeah.
As a result, though, that is not hiring people that are better than you, you know, like, right? And just recently, I feel like in the past couple of years, I brought on some very senior executives, a really great CFO, Chief Financial Officer, a really great COO who's, you know, helps run the business, and I posted the job postings for them. And it was like double what I had ever paid anybody else before. I was like, it was a big risk for me, a big move. Like, oh, I'm gonna go get some really great people. And I don't think it's just about money, but I also, if you want to get really great people, like they have options and they get paid a lot, right?
Well, yeah.
And so it just felt like such a big risk to go get someone and pay them this much money to do something that I can't really totally evaluate them for. Because they're better than me, right? You know, and I can have other people interview them and other things. But like, it's really hard to do that. It's really hard to trust yourself enough to do that, to trust the other person that you're bringing in that now supposedly knows more than you do in some way. And so again, it sounds obvious. It sounds like, of course you should hire better people that are better than you. Of course you should hire people different than you. Of course you should hire people that have different strengths than you. But you know what? Like, that is actually not easy at all. That's why everybody keeps saying it. Is because it sounds easy, but it is actually not easy.
Yeah, and like if the person is better than you at something, you should have them do that thing and then you go do other stuff. Like, again, sounds simple, but it's very hard to actually put into practice. Because it's like a little bit of a hit to the ego. It's like, well, I thought I was pretty good at that. And now I just found somebody that's better than me, and I am their manager maybe, or there's some sort of like, you know, organizational dynamic. No. I want to make sure I knock it over. So yeah, super hard to put into practice. Very easy to say.
Awesome. I keep going on. I've really enjoyed this conversation, and I could keep asking questions. But let's open it up to all of you. What kind of questions do you have for Justin? Let's start here in the front. Yeah.
Hi, Justin. I'm actually really jealous of Josh because I'd love to have a conversation with you too.
All right.
But
come by the office. We're just down the street.
For sure.
Yeah.
But I have 2 questions for you now. How do you convince a customer to sort of install these big battery boxes outside their home? What's the selling point, and I guess how do you convince them?
What's a sales pitch?
Yeah, great question. So we're the most affordable option that you have for keeping your lights on, basically. That's really the main sales pitch. Is your options are buy a generator, buy a battery, or sign up with Base. You lower your energy bill by 10 to 20%, and you have a backup battery for tens of thousands of dollars less than you otherwise would if you had to buy it yourself. And it's because that battery is being used all the time when the grid is up and running and making money to sort of pay itself back and pay you back.
For the customers that are installing it now,
Yeah.
most often, do you think which of them is more compelling right now? Is it, I really want a battery backup, I'm going to go with you?
Yeah.
Or is it, I'm going to save money on my electricity? I'm gonna go with
Yeah, we found that it's more of the former than the latter.
you. So you're going, the early adopters are, I want a battery.
Yeah, they want a, yeah. Some just want, or most just want backup. They don't necessarily want a battery, just to be very specific about it. They don't care what the solution is, or they might not be that interested in what the solution is. They just want to make sure the lights don't go off. So yeah, most people are interested in that. There's a ton of people that are shopping for generators or batteries all day long. Generac sells good generators, and Tesla and Enphase sell good batteries. But there's a lot of people that can't or don't want to afford like, just so you know, like, if you bought 2 Tesla Powerwalls, which is like roughly the size of our battery, and you had it installed, you're paying like $25,000, depending where you live and your city and all that. Sign up with Base, you pay somewhere on the order of $3,000, right? So we're like way, way cheaper because the cost is just the cost of install. We own and operate that battery. If you bought a Powerwall and it backs you up 5 to 10 days a year, the other 360 or 355 days a year, it's doing nothing. It's not supporting the grid. It should be supporting the grid. That is our model.
Thank you. And one more question.
Yeah.
Are you guys doing anything to sort of enhance the user experience of energy? So what I mean by that is, like, if you look at cars these days, they have apps that track your driving, give you analytics, that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
So I was thinking, like, do you guys maybe have a service that tells you about your energy usage, how to optimize it, that sort of feedback like that?
Yeah, we do. We do. It's something we have sort of called V0 of that right now, where we show customers their energy usage. We have some sort of ways to encourage them to save money on their energy bills, and that is a feedback loop that we're trying to strengthen. We're working on an app right now that's a web-based app, but yeah, we definitely have that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You handle the mic since you got it.
Hi. I was wondering, how do you reach consumers, like through marketing, and also how do you determine that would be your best marketing strategy?
Yeah, great question. So we have a bunch of different what we call channels, basically ways to reach a consumer. Our best and most favorite one is when it's a referral, and so our sort of highest hit rate targeting is when your neighbor signed up and they referred you. Funny enough, like our first customer that we installed on, I should say, back in May, had a power outage during a national championship football game, and I think this is in the Not Born article or maybe one of the other ones, but the power went out and his lights stay on, and his neighbors are all texting him like, "Hey, what's going on?" And they're like, "Oh yeah, I just signed up with this company Base." This literally happened like 3 days after. The best advertising ever. This happened like 3 days after we installed. This happened actually literally yesterday too. Funny enough, same thing happened where a customer was like, "Yeah, my neighbor was asking me, and so I sent them your referral link." So referrals are definitely the best way. It's not the only way. We do some digital advertising. If you've driven on, I'm forgetting what street it is, but in Pflugerville, we have a billboard now for more like brand awareness. We've done some direct mail. We've experimented with a bunch of different ways to target folks, and definitely by far the best is the referral. Well, I guess one other one thing about it is we've done some like local community events. So like we'll go into an HOA in a relatively new build neighborhood, and we'll throw a pool party. We'll say, "Hey, come sign up or give us your information," and your neighbor just down the street got it. You guys should get it too. There's a lot of like social proof in these neighborhoods that I think is very, very impactful and helpful for us to reach customers.
I can see your Super Bowl ad, and it's like
Your Super Bowl ad is like everybody's they're watching the game, right?
Yeah.
And then you see the lights go out in the whole neighborhood and that one thing, and then everybody's like coming over to their house to watch. Oh man, it's obvious, right? But like, oh man, that's totally your Super Bowl ad.
Yeah.
There was a Coinbase ad, I think, in the last Super Bowl or one where it was just the QR code. It's like, yeah, we got to do something adjacent to that. Yeah.
Hi, I had a quick question. So, how do you plan on like getting customers or like turning like generator owners or like those Tesla battery wall owners into like customers for your company? Do you have like a plan to like help them sell their generator or something, or like convert them to customers?
Yeah, so we don't, we haven't really targeted that market. There's a handful of folks that have small generators that don't want to maintenance or run them, or they don't support the whole home load. And so in those cases, we have sold to a handful of those folks. You might not know this, but like solar and batteries in particular and generators have like single-digit market share, like less than, like low single digits, like 2, 3, 4%, depending on where you're at. Even in a place like Texas, generators are a little bit more along the coast in Houston, that sort of thing. But most people do not have generators or batteries, and so we're really focusing on the folks that don't have them today.
Yeah, I guess could you speak into some of y'all's operational challenges for designing a battery that's not only supposed to be like power cycle for selling power back to the grid, but also because we are in central Texas, like extremely fault tolerant for like one of the most dramatic like weather systems.
Yeah, this is like one of the key hardware challenges, exactly as you're mentioning. So we mount our batteries outside. That is to make the install process less invasive to the customer, and as I was saying, like make it more similar each time, right? So like everybody's home layout is different, but like most people got like a side yard and a wall on their side yard. So we mount it outside, and so it's like whatever temperature it is right now outside is whatever temperature the battery is, plus its internal heating. So this is a super big challenge, and frankly, like one of the biggest things that we focus on in the design of our batteries. There's some, let's say, somewhat standard, relatively like good best practices you can do engineering-wise around water sealing, around humidity testing, and there's some like sort of scrappy things that you can do, and sort of best practices from other things that are outside. Cars is the best example, where you got to be able to drive it through rain, snow, hot weather, etc. And standards that we can use from those like third party IEEE standards or UL standards that we can use to kind of like design our hardware to it. So not to make it sound easy, but it's like we have a bunch of requirements that we set out when we go design the hardware. We go design it, we check to see if the design meets the requirements, then we go build the prototype, we check and see if the prototype meets the requirements. We're starting to go into production now. Everyone off the line goes and checks against some of those requirements.
You mentioned that the process of coming up with like the product was like iterative, right?
Yeah.
So how do you know when exactly it's time to like actually implement it? Like you've done enough research and you're pretty confident like something will stick.
Yeah, that is a really good question. Something that we struggle with quite a bit. It's like sort of Zach, my co-founder, and I were looking at each other like, "You gonna quit your job for this? Like, are you gonna quit your job for this?" It's like at some point you gotta just kind of like go for it. Like there's not like one thing where it's like, oh, okay, well now that we've crossed this barrier, of course we should definitely start the company. If the company was extremely obvious to start, then somebody else would have started it already. And so it's never, or not never. In the experience that I've had, it's not like obvious when to start. I think there's a few proof points that we wanted to see get closer. So there's like some of the financial modeling, some of the customer, like understanding what customers want, understanding some of the regulatory challenges. We basically wanted to have like a V0 of every sort of facet of the business that could be a problem. It's like, oh, well, you didn't read this part of the Texas administrative code that said you can't put batteries on homes and own them. Like, well, we like kept looking around. We're like, there's got to be something written down somewhere that says that we can't do this, and we couldn't find it. And so after that, we were like, okay, there's no deal breakers. Like, if we found them out in the next few months, we would just have to close. And so that's when we decided to go for it.
Hey, Justin, I have just a general question. You're talking about hiring the right people, and the sort of idea came up. It's like, okay, for to hire right people, you need to be able to become that, well, really good, established sort of like good person or skilled person.
Yeah.
And a really big portion of it is finding the right mentors. I was wondering, this more question for you, how did you find your mentors and who your mentors were?
Yeah. Mentors have been super impactful for me. Like, sounds cliche or obvious, but like my parents have been super impactful to me, and been lucky to sort of bounce ideas off them from the business perspective and the personal perspective. I have had my first manager at SpaceX was a guy who's only a few years older than me. And we joked that he had basically like just been like a few years ahead of me sort of in life. Like we had both did an internship at Apple, we both did an internship at SpaceX, we're both manufacturing engineers. Like he had become a lead right before I started. So I saw a lot of like, he's done pretty well, and so like maybe that's like a path that I could choose to go down. And I think I was like trying to be, in hindsight, probably didn't do a great job, but tried to be fairly intentional about finding a mentor and like sort of making sure that they knew that they were mentoring me and that I wanted mentorship from them. And the other thing that I've tried to do over the last few years is like find the person that is the expert in that, but has like many, many more years of experience in whatever it is. So we have an advisor who was a former chairwoman of the Public Utilities Commission in Texas, as an example. And like, I didn't know anything about, I didn't even know what the Public Utilities Commission was when we started the company. And she has taught both Zach and I as both like a personal and a company mentor, kind of everything there is to know about this world. And sort of, we basically were trying to be as self-reflective as possible, as I was saying earlier, to understand the things that we did not know, and then like go find someone that is the expert in that thing. Not necessarily as an employee, she's not an employee of the company, but has like the knowledge base that we're looking for and the experience set that we're looking for to help mentor Zach and I. Maybe not a totally complete answer, but I think like finding the specific people that have the specific experience that you're looking for, that are like many years ahead of you, and then like asking them very explicitly, hey, can you mentor me in this specific area? I would love to learn from you. 99 times out of 100, people are very open to that.
Yeah, I just had a couple more things too. You know, first of all, obviously Capital Factory is a big mentoring network. We mentor lots of people. I am a huge fan of mentoring. I think it's really valuable and important and meaningful and rewarding for me. That said, you know, your mentors, your advisors, the accelerators or awards or contests or prizes or pitch competitions, none of those things are going to be the things that make your company, right? And they're all wind at your back. They help. People will make, you know, hopefully really meaningful things. It'll feel like, wow, if it weren't for them. But at the same time, maybe you would have done it a different way. Like, you know, like, and so then you gotta own that. And what's most important is the people on the team. Now that said, I've been so fortunate to have so many great mentors, and obviously that's part of why we have this big network of doing that. And I would say two things on top of that. One is it is a very personal thing, so like it matters that you have a personal connection, and you need to feel that. And hopefully, if you feel it, they're feeling it too, right? You know, but like it starts with like, yeah, do you connect with these people? Do you think they would wanna talk to you more? You know, like, and as a slightly different take, you know, or just maybe a more nuanced way of talking about how, you know, Justin's comment of like saying, do you want to be a mentor? I mean, that's not how you start dating, right? You know, and so because that feels like you know, so the starting point is engage them by just ask them a question. Like and ideally a very specific one, like the one kind that like they would know the answer to, right? And you're not asking them for some big commitment. You're not asking them to like marry you or like, you know, be your mentor for life. You're asking them to answer a question that they can be. And you know what? Most people like to be helpful. It makes them feel good. They feel important and powerful when they can answer a question and be helpful, especially when it's a question like it's not fun to answer stupid questions, but when it's a question that like. They actually, oh yeah, like they should have asked me that because I'm the one that knows that and I'm the one that can answer that. Like, that's people like to do that. So it's like engage with them, lean in, and then you see how it feels. Then ask them more questions, and then that leads to like, wow, you know, like I don't know that I've ever asked someone to be my mentor, like using it that way. You know, it just happened, and like they are, and like at some point I'm like, wow, you're a really great mentor of mine. I didn't ask them to, but it was obvious they were, right? So.
Hi, Justin. My question was, while reading the article, I saw that you hired and brought people together from various different companies like SpaceX and Apple. And my first thought was that those two companies kind of have different approaches of like working, where SpaceX is very much like go quickly and like get real world feedback as soon as we can, while Apple has a more like late and like more like slow approach to that. And I know you mentioned that you try and align on culture, but how do you align on like those smaller ways of working in like the smaller parts of the culture that might actually cause the team to be a train wreck?
Yeah. So what we've done intentionally is we didn't want to take the culture from one company or the way of doing from one company and apply it to everything. So like our SpaceX, obviously I think it's a great company, still is a great company. I think most would agree. They don't do anything perfectly. There's aspects of their culture that I actually like didn't really like and I don't think are like applicable. I think Anduril was founded by Palantir and Oculus folks, right? And it's funny because like those are two different cultures, and you could sort of see the Anduril culture was like kind of a hybrid of those two generally. And so I think a lot of people will like over-index on the past culture they were at and go, well, if SpaceX did it, therefore it's good, and so we should do it too. We're like we explicitly tried to avoid that and build our own culture. I think an important point is that we're very intentional about it. We've like written down like what are the key values that we hold and what are the key behaviors that drive those values. We've written that down. We've shared it with the whole company. We share it with everyone that starts. And we say this is the way in which we behave. We both wrote it down, and like you should just be able to observe that is the way in which we operate at the company. So yeah, Apple and SpaceX have very different approaches as an example, and like there's definitely some conflict there amongst like the ex-Apple people and the ex-SpaceX people as it relates to how fast we should move or how sort of like how quickly we should ship something and what risk we operate at. Apple's more risk averse generally, SpaceX is more risk tolerant. And we just come to an agreement. It's like if we had only ex-SpaceX people, then we would just be like mimicking that culture, and that's what we explicitly did not want to do.
Yeah, I mean, this is such a big, important topic. So we can only touch on parts of it, but clearly, there's a reason why there's not just a book that says here's what your company culture should be. Because it's got to be different. Every company's different. It's run by different people. It has different people in it. And they're solving different problems and focused on different things. But it is so important. And with Capital Factory, and this may be the case with yours as well. But some advice I got from Jason Cohen, one of the founders of WP Engine, and a great friend of mine, and he helped us redo our core values a few years ago. And he said something that has really stuck with me. And he said, the best core values in your company should be things that the way it's working is you hear people say it. And he said, like in conversation, they use those phrases. And he says, your core values they're the reasons you use to make hard decisions that you're proud of. That whole sentence was important. But it's like why are we going to should we do this or that? Oh, we're going to do that. Why? Because insert core value. Right? And when you say that, you should feel good about it. Like you're making a hard decision and you're like, no, but we're going to do that because that's the right thing, because that's our values, right? They're decisions you're proud of. So one of Capital Factory's #1 core value is treat other people the way you want to be treated. That is a thing we say. You hear us say that. We how should we handle that contract that we're in with someone else? And how do we terminate it? Or how do we do this? Well, we treat other people the way we want to be treated. How do we handle that employee that's leaving? Well, we treat other people the way we want to be treated. Another one of our core values is focus on the entrepreneur. And for us, that's important because we have a lot of different stakeholders here. We have government partners and corporate partners and investors, and then the entrepreneurs. And it's like there's a lot of different people we're trying to please. And hopefully, what you feel from being here is we focus on making sure the entrepreneurs want to be here because everybody else wants to be here because of the entrepreneurs. But again, we'll say well, should we do that? Well, we should do that because we focus on the entrepreneur. We should always have a startup pitch at every event. Why? Because why else are we doing the event? We're focused on entrepreneurs, we have to be, right? So anyway, I love that saying of the core values are really good when you hear people say it as a reason. We're going to do that because insert core value. Then you've nailed it.
Thank you.
Totally.
So I've been wondering, this is I guess more like a technical or
I don't think your mic's on, or you gotta put some button to it.
Oh, okay, there we go. Is it working now or?
I hear you.
Fine.
Just speak up the best you can. Yeah. Screen.
Okay, so it should be working now? Okay, cool. So I guess this might be more of a technical question, or a supply chain type question. So in the article, I read that you don't make your own battery cells, right? But then, given how like given how close or given how important it is for say like the price of cell or like the price of raw materials is to developing your technology and like bringing say the price down in the future. So for actually helping spread this technology to households across the city, across the state. Do you see now with sort of this buzz that I'm kind of getting that like I'm seeing a lot more emphasis on getting domestic lithium production and other like rare earth production up by companies say like American Battery Technology or like Piedmont Albemarle. Like, do you get the feeling that in potentially the near future, the price of your battery might go down, and like now is the an opportune time to be making this technology, if that makes sense?
Yeah, it's a good question. So we can't do everything, and I think this is like an important lesson that we've learned over the last year and a half or so is being pretty focused on what you're trying to do with the company, and only like quote unquote insourcing or just doing things that matter to the company is really important. So like we could have outsourced all of our deployments as an example and like found Sun Run or something to go install all of our batteries. That's really core to our business though, because A, it drives cost, and B, it drives customer experience. So we chose to insource that. Cells are like definitely important, but like we do not have A, the scale today, or B, really any good ideas around how to make cells way better than the other players in the market. And so we said, okay, we're just gonna like outsource that and like come back to that in the future. So domestic production is super important, something I'm personally very passionate about, and something we're doing on the assembly side, like everything upstream of the cells. So like the battery is, a lot of it is the cells, but it's not like there are more things to the battery than just the cells. And so we're doing a lot of that assembly, or moving a lot of that assembly over to the US. But you're right, it's like, it's a very important problem. It's not something that we have, even though we've raised a good bit of capital, we definitely don't have enough to go build a cell factory. These are like, if you ever go into a cell factory, they're like literally a little city. These are like hundreds of thousands or millions of square feet. And it's just like not the startup game. That is the scaled big company game. And we might play that game someday. No plans to right now. We're really focused on kind of everything but the cells from a hardware perspective today.
I was asking Zach if they were going to build a nuclear reactor.
He said the same answer, not yet.
Later.
Yeah.
Great. All right, we got time for a couple more questions.
All right.
Mike's right there.
Yeah. Real fast, can you talk about, you talk about strategy, decision making, and I want to know your thoughts on, like, you have your hands in a lot of pots, right? Because to me, good things, like the world's problems do not exist in isolation, right? Like there's interdependency. So can you talk about building and selling complex solutions, so like just complex problems, right? Like when it's not just one facet.
Yeah. There are, to be clear, many successful companies that solve a very isolated problem. I think the best companies, though, solve a bunch of different problems. And most successful companies, at least in my observation, start by solving one problem. Like the Amazon stories example, like they just sold books. And then they went and sold a bunch of other stuff. And then they went and sold everybody's stuff and servers and anyways. And so like this sort of the complexity goes up over time. But it seems difficult to sort of play in this space, so to speak, in the energy space without it at least starting somewhat complex. There's something that Zach and I spent a lot of time on is like, we have a bunch of interesting ideas around solar, around commercial batteries, around going into regulated markets like we talked about. There's like, you could sell homeowners other energy products like water heaters and heat pumps and all this other stuff. It is just like not something that we want to focus on today. And so I think the level of complexity, there's like the minimum bar of complexity in the energy space is relatively high compared to building an app or something. You need a lot more disciplines, but we're trying to keep a lid on that to the extent possible. You asked about selling to customers also. This is like actually a really key thing. Like, we still are trying to figure out exactly what our core messaging is to customers. I mentioned to you, it's like the core messaging is most affordable backup on the planet, certainly in Texas. And that is like compelling, but then like but I choose you as my provider, and like, what if you're moving from a state that has regulated utilities where you're like, you just have a utility that you pay? Like, these are not easy topics to explain. And it's like, but if you're the retailer, do you own the pole next to my house? Like, no, we don't. Here's how it works. And so like, there's a big focus of our go-to-market motion is customer education. We have a whole, if you go to our website, basepowercompany.com, see there's like a whole long list of FAQs. We're filming some videos actually now to like explain to folks how this works. People know that batteries exist from phones, but like if you're generally more elderly, like you might not know that batteries on homes are even a thing. Like, I know what a battery is, I know what a home is, but I didn't know those two went together. And so customer education has been a extremely important part of our go-to-market motion.
Pretty simple question. How long did it take you to generate revenue? And do you think there's a way to generalize that for startups?
Yeah, we had first revenue 9 months into the company, 9 or 10 months into the company. There's no right answer here. Like, some companies spend years before revenue. Some companies like have revenue as they're raising their seed round or just getting started, or they've sold a contract and then they use that to go raise a seed round as an example. So there's no right answer necessarily. But that's how long we spent. And like, we had the good fortune to be able to raise a pretty healthy size seed round, as Josh was mentioning. And so we had some runway to go kind of build out a lot of the product before we took it into market. Not every company is as fortunate, and you have to sort of change your strategy based on your capital availability and how much sort of runway or ability to sort of like complete the product you have. We definitely, like, the first install that we did was way lower features and frankly a little less reliable and like more problematic to us than the install we did today, as an example. And so like, when you think about, you go out to fundraise, like a whole other topic we can talk about, I'm sure you've talked about in the past. When you go out to fundraise, you kind of want to think like, how much time do I need and how good does the product need to be before I can make that first sale? Sometimes it's like, we can already make the first sale. Sometimes it's like, well, this is actually a really complicated or big investment thing and take multiple years. I personally bias for the shorter. There are many, especially hardware companies, that will like go away in the lab for 3 years, raise a few rounds before they even have their first dollar of revenue in market. That's tough. You're not getting customer feedback that way. You might not know if the product even works. Like, I think the iterative approach is something that I personally subscribe to, and by sort of extension, the company does too.
All right, I think one more question. Or two more. You and then behind you.
Can you walk us through like a challenge or roadblock that you faced that you were like, this might be the end of it, and kind of how you got past that?
Oh man.
Near-death experience.
Oh man. Let's see. We had, on the regulatory side, I don't want to share a ton here, but we have, not really that recently, but like a few months ago, we deal with the utilities in order to basically put a battery on the system, even though we don't have to, we sort of become the utility, so to speak, as a retailer. We have to deal with them from this, it's called the interconnection agreement, basically. And there's some ambiguity in basically the rules as to how you do this. What we found is that we were meeting the letter but not the spirit of the rule, and we had a disagreement with them, and we had to go back and fix a lot of our systems that we installed. Expensive, time-consuming, distracting, all of the bad things. Luckily, it's like we've recovered from it and we're fine now, but this was like a challenge that we had. We're like, oh man, like this is going to take a fifth or a quarter of the company's time, full time, for the next few weeks to go solve, and like this is a real problem. I think that's probably the closest like real big problem that we've had so far. I'm sure we're going to have way more near-death existential threats. We have a company actually that we had talked to very early on, that I won't name, but that came and visited us, and like they were basically like becoming friends with us, and they're in this sort of the same space. They just came out with a competitive product a few weeks ago. They raised a bunch of money, came out with a competitive product. Fast follower, so to speak. Yeah, it was sort of like, man, I wouldn't feel good if I was that company doing that to us, but like, we'll see if they're really we'll see if they're competitive, but they're like playing in the Texas energy market, putting batteries on businesses in this case, in the exact same model that we're doing. Took like, I would say, some of our IP around the business model and their financing and that sort of thing. But that's another one where it's like it could be a problem in the future, and it's like we're monitoring it kind of daily.
Awesome. One more.
Yeah.
Hey Justin, I'm really excited about this story about your startup, and actually as much as I read about the article, I was like, I just wanted to know more, but I have too many questions, but I just wanted to know, where do you see yourself in the next 5 years? Just, that's it.
What do we see for the next few years? Well, I'd say for the next 2 or 3, it's like really focus on the core products. It's like, how do we get the rate of installs up and the number of customers inbound up? This is really important, and it's like, in any factory, like kind of like we're operating basically, it's like how many dollars go in and how many dollars go out, how many parts go in, how many parts go out, or how many finished assemblies go out. And so we're like really focused on getting that number up. Like we have 4 big dashboards in the office, like TVs roughly this size, and it's like the number of installs we did today, the number of installs we did this month, the number of installs we've done cumulative. Like that is the number that must go up, and everybody's focused on that number. And there's a few other like financial metrics there in the next few years. In 3 or 4 or 5 years, I think like expanding outside of Texas, like Texas is an enormous place, as you know, expanding outside of Texas into these other markets, like solar, like other home energy devices, like commercial, like the regulated markets. Those are really interesting to us. But again, we're like really just focused, and I think this is very helpful from sort of focusing the team, is like, there is basically one thing that matters, and this is what it is, and everybody's working on that one thing. And you should be able to tie either like indirectly or directly whatever you're doing every day to that one thing. And if you can't tie what you're doing to that one thing, like come talk to me, or talk to Zach or one of the other folks at the company, leaders of the company, and like tell us why you think that what you're doing is not helping us achieve big number go up. Because if it's not, then we should talk about why you're doing it and probably stop what you're doing. Right? So that's like the kind of the core focus over the next few years.
Gary Keller from Keller Williams here in Austin has a book called The One Thing. And
oh yeah,
I haven't actually read all of it, but I believe that's the big part of the thing, the focus as well.
Yeah, and like smart, ambitious, curious people will want to do a bunch of different stuff. Yeah. And it's like we have a ton of stuff to do just to make that one thing, one number.
And it allows you to know what to say no to.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
All right, so we're going to wrap, but this is our first time this semester having a guest speaker. This is what the rest of the classes will be like, so please don't leave yet. We're going to do 2 more things. One, I'm going to tell you who's coming next. 3 more things. Then we're going to take a big selfie with Justin in it. So please help us make a great big selfie for him. Take back. And then we're going to put up the attendance slide. So next week, we've got Liv coming in. I mentioned Liv already. Liv is... I'm so excited about this one. I'm all excited about all of them. We get such interesting people to come to you. You're part of my superpower for getting people to come in because they want to come talk to you. But please look her up. We will send some homework. She is so interesting. She's definitely an entrepreneur. She is not a typical one. She doesn't have a big startup like this. She is a champion poker player. She's like a science social media evangelist. She is a crypto investor and evangelist, and really, really interesting. So I'm so excited to have her here next week. So let's, everyone, if you could, just cluster in right here behind us. We'll do the selfie, and then we'll put up the attendance slide.
All right, so everybody right here. Like this. Alright, guys. Give them the hook up. Alright. Awesome. Thank you, Justin. Really appreciate it.
Were you able to
Yeah, we'll keep
finish
it
it?
on.
So it's like a channel.